Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Greater Manchester Police Fire and Crime Panel this Monday, the 18th of November 2024. I'm going to start the meeting with apologies.
Just got a few, Chair, so you just have to bear with me a second. Councillor Hussain Oldham, Councillor Dean Oldham, Councillor Bentham Salford, Councillor Barrett Stockport, Councillor Austin Stockport, Councillor Jeeva Bolton, but we kindly have Councillor David Chadwick as a sub here today. Councillor Anderton from Wigan, but again kindly we have Councillor Yvonne Cleave here. And Councillor Walmsley from Bury, and kindly we have Councillor Gold here in her stead.
Thank you, and thank you for subs coming to replace members. Chair's announcements and urgent business. So first of all, Tameside membership changes. The panel needs to note that following a cabinet reshuffle at Tameside Council, that Councillor Vimal Choksey will be standing down from the panel, and the panel expresses its thanks to Councillor Choksey for his valuable contributions to our work programme over the past several years. The new Tameside member will be confirmed following a meeting on the 3rd of December. Then to speak about the overview and scrutiny task and finish group on the safety of women and girls. The first session of the task and finish group on the safety of women and girls, particularly how it's considered in Greater Manchester policy design and implementation, took place on the 6th of November. It's a joint task and finish group with members joining from Joint Health Scrutiny Committee and the Police, Fire and Crime Panel. So Carol Judge Campbell and Kate Smith from the Safer and Stronger Communities Directorate gave a presentation to the group of 12 members to provide some useful background information as a starting point for the discussions, and the task and finish group selected the following area for their review. Ensuring future GM transport strategy and policy is designed and delivered, making sure that the perspective of women and girls is central to future thinking. This was an area that members felt they could have the most influence on this agenda with. And Councillor Helen Hibbert from Stockport was appointed as chair for the review. I'm also going to mention a couple of things that I've been attending during the last few weeks. So last week was a bit busy. We had Safe Drive Stay Alive at Middleton Arena that I went to, and I think there may have been in other locations, but Safe Drive Stay Alive, very, very important presentation to a packed audience of young people of the Safe Drive Stay Alive agenda. Last Thursday, myself and Kate, Deputy Mayor, were at the Rhodes Foundation Trust Awards at the Royal Northern College of Music. I have to say it was strange being there without a brass band, but it was an awards ceremony for the probation service. I'd also like to mention that tomorrow I'll be at the National Association for Police, Fire and Crime Panels AGM, which is online, and will represent Greater Manchester in that meeting. And I'd also like to mention congratulations to Rochdale's Fireground Museum that has been awarded the King's Award for Voluntary Service, which is basically the MBE for the voluntary sector. I'd also like to thank Dave Russell for his kind letter to the Fireground trustees saying what a good job they're doing. And if you've never been, you need to go. Lastly, to welcome Lynn Ridsdale as the portfolio lead on Safer and Stronger Communities. Welcome, Lynn, to your first meeting. Thank you. Sorry that was rather extended, but a lot's been going on. Third item is declarations of interest. Will you please remember that to put those declarations in if you have them. I believe you've got one, Kate, that we need to mention.
Yes, Chair, and the form has been completed and submitted. This is in relation to the report of Deputy Mayor's decisions at the end of the agenda in relation to a decision to extend a contract with Manchester Metropolitan University, of which I'm a governor, so I have a conflict of interest. I did not take any part in that decision.
Thank you for that. Because there are so many of us in the meeting, I'm not going to go around and do introductions. We've all got names in front of us, but when we're speaking for the first time, it'd be really useful if you could say who you are. We are a bit pressed for time. There is a meeting in this room at 4 o'clock when we finish, so I have no minutes to go over. It's going to be absolutely spot on today. Welcome the new independent member, Tony. Tony. It's opposite me. I should be able to see him. Tony, welcome to your first meeting, Tony. And welcome to everybody else. Thank you for coming along this afternoon. So, on to item 4, minutes of the meeting of the 18th of September 2024. I'm going to look through those minutes, do them page by page, and checking that everything's right. So, on page 5, which is basically people here, page 6, page 7, page 8.
Chair, yes. In item CP 5524, where it says there were no declarations of interest, in fact, there was a declaration of interest, and that resolved statement needs to be amended.
So if we can alter PFCP 5524 to reflect that. That's page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17.
Chair, yes, again, if I may. Yes. In item 65 of 24, in the final bullet point, it says support hubs for mental health services were proving to be a success. They are support hubs for a holistic range of services, not just mental health services for people on probation.
Thank you for that. Sorry. Thank you for that. So PFCP 6524 altered accordingly. Page 18. Page 19. And that is the end of those minutes. So that was a lengthy meeting. We have no other alterations to the minutes. Can I ask that somebody propose that they're put forward as a correct record? Thank you, Robin. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Rose. Thanks very much. We'll take those minutes as being an accurate record of that meeting. Which moves us to item 5. We're on page 21. This report is the Finance Precept Process Update. It's going to be presented by Claire Postlethwaite, who's going to explain the statutory duties of the Police Fire and Crime Panel in relation to the setting of the Police Precept for 25-26. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of Steve Wilson, GMCA Treasurer, so I'm Claire Postlethwaite, Director of Operational Finance for the CA, for those who may have not met me before. The report outlines the process for the proposed precept for 25-26, and I'm just going to pull out 2 areas. So area 2 is the regulatory side of how the precept is determined, and part 3 of the report outlines how this applies to GM in particular, and the dates are in the appendix and outlined in a flow chart, so hopefully it's a fairly straightforward paper for the panel.
Thank you for that. So the Police Fire and Crime Panel has to note the statutory duties of the Police Fire and Crime Panel in relation to the setting of the police precept, and to note the timetable for the setting of the 25-26 police precept and requiring a meeting of the panel before the 31st of January 2025. We note that. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Item 6 is the Baird Inquiry Update Report. This report is going to be presented by the Deputy Mayor, Kate Green. They're going to provide a progress report to the panel on the implementation of the recommendations outlined in the Baird Inquiry report into the treatment of people arrested and taken into police custody in Greater Manchester, with a focus on women and girls. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Chair. As colleagues will know, the Baird Inquiry was commissioned by the Mayor last summer following a Sky News report into the treatment of 3 women who had been arrested by Greater Manchester Police, taken into custody and strip searched. And following the concern about that broadcast, the Mayor invited Dame Vera Baird-Casey, the former Victims Commissioner, to look into the treatment of people in GMP's custody, predominantly looking at the experience of women and girls, but in the event she also looked at the cases of 3 men in her report. And her report also, in practice, extended beyond what took place in custody to look at the experience of arrest and also the handling of complaints made by some of those who had been in GMP's custody and then made formal complaints about their treatment. Dame Vera's report, which was published this July, made 40 recommendations for actions, mostly for Greater Manchester Police. 26 of the 40 were for Greater Manchester Police. Some were for me and for my office in the Combined Authority, and some were for national bodies, including government. I'll predominantly concentrate today on the recommendations for Greater Manchester Police, Chair, where panel members will be able to see from the very comprehensive grid that has been presented to you quite a lot of detail about how those recommendations have been taken on board by Greater Manchester Police, the actions that have been taken, and in my judgment, in the case of all but 2 of them, I now assess those recommendations to have been discharged by GMP. The process of arriving at that judgment has been through the medium of a mayoral oversight group, which I've chaired on the Mayor's behalf, to track progress against the recommendations and their application in GMP, and indeed the other recommendations for other bodies. And the conclusion that I have reached is that there has been very, very good progress since the publication of the report in July. But in fact, quite a lot of the steps that GMP have taken and which are documented on the report to the panel had already been in train because of the very critical HMIC report that Greater Manchester Police had received at the beginning of last year, which made a number of recommendations in similar vein to some of Dame Vera's comments, and which GMP was already addressing and rectifying. And the nature of the progress has been really welcome. Training has been completed. Expectations have been set very clearly for staff in custody suites. There have been real improvements to the physical environment in the custody suites, and our performance and supervisory structure now, which gives us a much tighter grip inside Greater Manchester Police in relation to the way in which those recommendations are being carried out. But I think crucially, the story doesn't stop here, with Greater Manchester Police having now, in my view, discharged the majority of the recommendations, because one of the really important things that the public and all of you will want to be assured of now is that this set of activities results in sustained high quality conduct and behaviour by police officers and staff in relation to those who are arrested and detained and brought into Greater Manchester Police's custody. And to that end, one of the recommendations made by Dame Vera, which was for me, not for Greater Manchester Police, was the establishment of an independent scrutiny panel to be able to track GMP's performance in relation to arrests and custody. That panel has now been appointed. It consists of independent members with professional and similar backgrounds in a range of disciplines, but with an understanding of welfare, police and criminal justice, some community sector partners too. And it will have its first meeting in December, and it will undertake its work through a process of visits, dip sampling, looking at records, and being able to question through me any areas that it feels are not being implemented and sustained satisfactorily in Greater Manchester Police. And we've also been able to discharge another of Dame Vera's recommendations for me, which was to appoint what she called a super independent custody visitor. So we already benefit from a cadre of independent custody visitors who make unannounced visits to Greater Manchester Police custody suites every single day, and who prepare reports on what they see. Their focus is entirely on the welfare of detainees, and they will meet and speak to all detainees who are willing to speak to them, which in my experience, having shadowed them, is most of them. But to supplement the work of the independent custody visitors, we've now made an appointment in my office of an experienced officer who's joining us from, I think, Kent, I'm right in saying, who will support the scrutiny panel that we are establishing, and also the information which we draw from our independent custody visitors on wider quality and training support, so that we can be really sure that the grip from our office on performance in GMP is continuing to demonstrate the improvements that we've seen over the last few months. I think it's important to recognise that not all of the recommendations will be fully discharged by GMP. In particular, 2 remain outstanding, and we will not be able to complete them, as Dame Vera had suggested. They relate to the ability to designate certain cells entirely for women detainees. As much as is possible, that will be the case, and every custody suite in Greater Manchester is now holding an area of cells for women, but obviously if male cells become completely full, it may from time to time be necessary to use some of those cells that have been dedicated for women detainees to hold men. I should assure the panel that every single cell in GMP's custody suites is a single occupancy cell. There's no prospect of a woman being held in the same cell as a man at the same time. The other one, again, is a logistical issue for GMP. Dame Vera recommended the allocation of a female welfare officer to every female detainee, and that is in place. However, what she also recommended is that when a female detainee pressed a buzzer for assistance, a female officer should attend her. That won't always be possible because of these pressures on staffing logistics. But again, I think I hope colleagues will understand that GMP will have those female welfare officers always in place, and will do their best to ensure that women have the opportunity to speak to women officers to have their needs met. Dame Vera also made, as I say, a number of recommendations in relation to arrest, and those will be very much a focus of attention for the custody and arrest scrutiny panel too. You may have seen that this morning she was interviewed, as indeed was the Mayor, on Sky TV, and she spoke to me herself over the weekend, and I'm pleased to say that Dame Vera is very pleased with the progress that has been made by Greater Manchester Police since her report was published, as am I, and I'm very grateful to all of the staff in GMP who have worked with us really to ensure that we can offer the assurance that the public rightly expect, that the care and welfare of people who are arrested and detained by GMP will be a priority for them. There are a number of recommendations, as I say, for national bodies, including for the College of Policing, the National Police Chiefs Council and the Home Office. Obviously, we have no direct ability to influence the pace at which those recommendations are implemented. And for example, some of those in relation, for instance, to the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, we do not expect any very swift conclusion to a review that I know the Home Office is undertaking in relation to whether there's a need for changing any of the definitions or parameters of PACE, specifically, for example, in relation to the rules around intimate strip searches and definitions and so on. The other area that I should probably mention to the panel chair is in relation to complaints handling. And each one of the individuals featured, excuse me, in Dame Vera's report, where a complaint has been made, and continues to be proceeding through the police complaints process, that is something that I am continuing to have oversight of as those complaints are progressed. It's not something, and I hope the panel will forgive me, that we want to put in detail into the public domain. Obviously, those are individual cases that are subject to the statutory complaints procedure, which we obviously would not want to compromise. But I do want to assure the panel that I am following the process of those complaints very closely, not least because, of course, they bring some wider lessons for further improvements that we may want to see in Greater Manchester Police. So, Chair, I think it would probably be useful for me to allow some time for questions and comments, but I hope colleagues have found the very comprehensive report that's been provided useful, and that will be of reassurance to you and to the public.
Thank you for that, Kate. Is there any member who would like to ask a question? Richard, Councillor Gold.
Thanks for that. I was just wondering about the independent panel. Is there, I think I missed the terms of reference if it's in there, apologies, but is there any sort of timetable of who and when they will be reporting back?
Okay, thank you. So its first meeting will take place in December, and it will report to me. And that was a recommendation from Dame Vera in her report, that it would be there to advise and report to me on the findings of their scrutiny, dip sampling visits and so on. And I would envisage that through my Deputy Mayor's Executive, which is my 6-weekly oversight of GMP, I will be able to pick up issues and ensure that we've got a process of taking the input from the panel and applying it into the wider scrutiny processes that I have in place. Of course, if this panel would like further updates, we will be absolutely able to bring further reports to you. And it may be that you will seek those, that maybe you ask for them at a certain point, either because you want regular updates or because you become aware of an issue that is being discussed in the public domain. But it may equally be that we identify, as a result of the input from the panel, that there are issues that we think it would be useful to bring back to your attention. But the frequency and the regularity of the scrutiny will be, because the panel is reporting to me, that I will be able to connect it into the Deputy Mayor's Executive scrutiny process.
Thank you. Councillor Bridges.
Yeah, thank you. It was on the panel, and it's good, obviously, to hear that we've got these much enhanced scrutiny arrangements. And I suppose really the proof will be in the pudding about what they actually uncover. And I think it would be helpful to have stuff back here at the right time, because what you would hope is that actually they would recover largely improvement, but actually some problems as well, because I think sometimes, it shouldn't require a Sky expose to uncover problems. The enhanced scrutiny arrangement should do it. So we wouldn't want this to be just, everything's great, now everything's fine. Actually, you would be more reassured if you heard a decent amount of problems as well as a lot of improvement. So that's hopefully what you'd be able to feed back to us, that we do have a system that we can be confident is actually flushing out where there are issues and be able to be rectified as well.
I hope we won't uncover lots of problems, and I would really point to both the significant increase in resources in the custody function, which came off the back of the HMIC report, and the efforts that are being made by very senior officers. We have the Deputy Chief Constable and Chief Superintendent Davis here, who have been really leading on this work in GMP, really to change the culture and the expectations of staff. And Assistant Chief Constable Matt Boyle, obviously, in terms of the neighbourhood and response approach to arrest. So I hope we're not going to come with lots of problems, but I agree, Councillor Bridges, there is an opportunity to learn and spot new trends and emerging issues, as well as to identify if practice is slipping in particular areas. Colleagues may recall, actually, that the initial concern was that this might be a problem confined to one custody suite, because the first 3 cases that Sky identified were all in Pendleton, and we discovered that wasn't actually a place-specific issue at all. It was a wider issue across all of the custody suites. And I think the other thing I would say is that bigger than that still, the lessons that GMP have been able to take from Dame Vera's report are absolutely being recognised by police forces up and down the country. Nobody thinks that what happened in Greater Manchester Police wasn't happening everywhere else. And I have been, and I know Dame Vera has been too, at a number of national events and discussions where other police forces and indeed the National Police Chiefs Council and the Home Office are very actively looking at the application of the recommendations across policing as a whole. Custody is a really challenging, busy, dynamic environment. And over the last few months as well, because of the crisis in the prisons, we've seen even greater pressure in police custody suites as they've been taking the overspill from prisons or being unable to get people out of police cells and into court. So I think it is really important that even if everything were going very, very well, the constant changes and new pressures that come to bear in custody make it really useful for us to have this scrutiny panel so we can respond and react very quickly as the circumstances change.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Garrido.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just two questions. One in relation to the independent scrutiny panel. Have you considered having some elected members on that, or are they just professional people that you have on the panel? So that's one. The second, in fact, I've not read the report, yes, I must admit, so I apologise if I'm covering things that I should know about. But one of the concerns, I believe, when all this came about originally, was the way arrests were actually dealt with in situ. So, we talked a lot about custody suites, and obviously my concern is that there seems to be reliance placed on evidence received from one person without really checking it out thoroughly before making an arrest. And that seemed to concern me, the way that seems to be done.
Yes, Councillor Garrido, you're right on that latter point. It was surprising to me when we received the report how much of it was actually about arrest rather than what happened in the custody suites. And exactly as you say, a number of the cases exemplified a situation where it was one word against another, but that the officers attending were not looking at the whole context and history that might have led to a particular incident taking place, and specifically often in relation to domestic abuse cases where one partner had a long history of abusing the other, then counter allegations were being made, and the police didn't appear to be addressing all of that context, even although they would have known that from their own records about the history of previous allegations of abuse. It was also, I think, a concern that there was, and Dame Vera accepts the value of the use of arrest packs, where information is used to execute warrants or make visits to people at times when officers have, as it were, a bit of downtime. But that often meant, for example, that they were turning up at 2 and 3 in the morning to carry out arrests, which were then being justified on the basis of, a need to progress very rapidly the progress of an investigation. Yet those arrest packs would have been sitting around for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks till officers were able to make that call, completely negating the ostensible justification for the necessity to arrest. So there were some real issues around the process of arrest being at odds with the legitimacy that is provided in statute for arrest. And then when those individuals were brought to the custody suite, Dame Vera identified that the custody sergeant was not always properly questioning that necessity for arrest and carrying out their responsibilities in relation to checking the legitimacy of that arrest. There's been a big programme and effort in training, officer training around that, and also a real attention to the use of alternatives to arrest and alternatives to custody. But I think this is a big cultural piece for Greater Manchester Police because, as colleagues will know, the problem of 4 and 5 years ago was that our arrest rate was woefully low compared to most similar forces. It's now comparable. We're not the highest, in fact, in relation to arrests per head compared to, say, West Yorkshire, West Mids. We sit in about the right place, I would suggest now, for our most similar force group. But I think the cultural change from GMP not arresting people when they should or recording crimes when they should to now getting them properly doing their job to now not overcompensating is going to be the big cultural test for GMP and officers now, and that's going to be a big area of attention for the scrutiny panel. In relation to membership of the scrutiny panel, Dame Vera didn't make any recommendations as to whether it would be appropriate or even consider the issue of should elected members be part of that panel. We have, of course, this panel as an opportunity for elected members to scrutinise through me what the panel uncovers. And I would respectfully suggest I think that's the right role for this panel, Chair, that you are the scrutiny panel that hold me to account. And it's my job to hold Greater Manchester Police to account and to take the information that the scrutiny panel, which is reporting to me, is uncovering for me and bringing that information and findings to you. So that's how we have set it up. I don't know, Vicky, who's my Assistant Director, perhaps if you'd like to say a little bit more about the membership, Vicky?
Yeah, so Dame Vera is very prescriptive on who she wanted to form that scrutiny panel and what it should look like and what it should cover. We have got a draft terms of reference, but we've just got we're just working through final data sharing issues, because as you imagine, that's quite an important aspect to the panel. So once we've done that, we would intend to publish the terms of reference, which I think answers one of the earlier questions. But she's very specific about criminal justice and victim service organisations, people with both professional and lived experience. And we have very much built the panel around that recommendation. So, Women's Equality Alliance, and we've got someone from the Crown Prosecution Service, people with experience of being, a magistrate, ex-magistrate, people with lived experience of custody in previous lives, if I can say that. So it is very much built upon what Vera recommends, and once we're in a position to finalise those terms of reference, then we can share those.
Just have a quick comeback, Chair. So I appreciate what you said, but can we be assured that those arrest procedures have started, that the revised arrest procedures have started to take effect? Because we don't want something that's going to take 12 months or 2 years. I think the general public needs to feel that there's something happening very quickly if it's not already happening.
It's a very good question, Chair, and I would be hesitant to give a complete assurance that GMP make thousands of arrests every year, and obviously it would be a brave person that said that they are all faultless. But what I can assure you, Councillor Garrido, is we're already picking up, even in advance of having the independent scrutiny panel, we've been doing some sampling ourselves from my office, both visits by officers from my team to look at records, but also through the complaints process, and I'm the relevant review body for police complaints handled by GMP, that we are continuing to pick up examples where we are concerned about whether the quality of arrests and the justification for arrests is being fully addressed, as Dame Vera has rightly suggested it needs to be. So we are very, very mindful of the fact that there is still room for more improvement. And I raised cases personally the other day with the Chief Constable, because it's a real priority, I think, for the Chief, for the Deputy Chief Constable, that this is got right through the force. And so it's getting very, very active attention already from our office, and that will be supplemented when we have the independent panel established next month.
Okay, thank you, councillors, for those questions and comments. Sorry, Tony.
Just a question around obviously the function is the function, the process is the process. Has there been any equality impact assessments for the fact that you're specifically looking at women, but there could be issues around transgender, there could be issues around disability for the range of services that you're providing? So I don't know if you've done that, but that would be the way in which you would then look at everybody else going through Greater Manchester.
So the report itself hasn't galvanised an equality impact assessment, but it's absolutely right that the equalities and disproportionality issues are endemic to Dame Vera's report. And some of the issues that you highlight are also being considered very carefully in other scrutiny and oversight bodies that we work through, including, for example, our Independent Police Ethics Committee, which has been looking at the issue of transgender searches and strip searches, and where we have been hoping to see some national guidance, which still hasn't been forthcoming, and the issues around ethnicity, disability. Disability in particular features quite heavily in Dame Vera's report in relation to a couple of the detainees' cases that she describes. that has, I think, you will see our attention to those issues being very much a focus again for the independent scrutiny panel and the questions that they will be asking, and indeed that I will be asking them to address and report back to me on my behalf. So as I say, when Dame Vera began her report, it had originally been focused on women and girls. But she opened the process by inviting people who had experience of being arrested by GMP and had concerns about their treatment to get in touch with her and tell her their story. And that swiftly led to 3 men becoming 3 of the case studies in the report. And Dame Vera suggests that in some of the cases that she reports on, there was racial disproportionality as well, and racism may have been a factor in the way that the police conducted themselves. So they are all issues that are threaded through Dame Vera's report, and therefore which we need to ensure are threaded through the way we carry out the scrutiny functions that we've now put in place.
Thank you for those responses as well. Thank you, Tony, for your question. So we're moving on then now to what we are requested to do. So having listened to Kate's commentary on the independent scrutiny panels, the appointing of independent scrutiny visitors, the notes made about cells and separate cells and female welfare officers, complaints handling, and the recommendations for national practice. We note that the progress made against the Baird Inquiry recommendations by both Greater Manchester Police and Greater Manchester Combined Authority are noted. That the engagement with national bodies to progress national recommendations be noted. And that it be noted that ongoing mayoral oversight arrangements are in place to ensure that these recommendations are delivered and embedded, and that the resulting improving standards are maintained and built upon. That is what we are noting, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm also going to say we've also asked for updates following Councillor Garrido's question about the makeup of the scrutiny panels. So if elected members are not on those scrutiny panels by Dame Vera's recommendations, then can we have those updates coming to this panel, please? Okay. That's be brought back. Yes, that's. Have you noted it? That's what I want to know is, have you noted it? Good. Thank you. Don't speak to me in abbreviations. Sorry, Lee. Thank you. So we note all those things, and thank you for that report. We're moving on now to item 7, which is the Police and Crime Plan for December 24 to March 2028. A report that's going to be presented by Deputy Mayor Kate Green and Vicky Sugars, providing a brief outline and summary of the draft new Standing Together Police and Crime Plan, which accompanies the panel are asked to consider the draft and provide the Mayor with recommendations on the draft prior to the plan being designed and then published. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. So the Mayor is required to publish a new police and crime plan within 1 year of his re-election in May this year, and we have been engaging in a very extensive programme of public and stakeholder consultation to draw up a plan which we want to publish by the end of this year, this calendar year, in order that it can inform and give the public information about policing and crime priorities ahead of the preset setting exercise and the consultation that we will be required to undertake in relation to that in the new year. And we've been really pleased with the extent of engagement that we've had from public and partners over the last few months. Indeed, Chair, you attended and chaired one of the events for us, and I think you would say that they've been really lively, constructive, and have resulted, I think, in a plan this time which is really tight and well focused and very clear about the areas that we believe are the priorities that people in Greater Manchester want from the Police and Crime Plan. We've also really made we've been very aware of the need to align the priorities for policing and crime to the wider ambitions, vision and priorities of the Mayor and the combined authority. So there's a much closer correlation now between the Mayor's vision, for example, around pathways for young people, safety on the transport network and the expansion of the B network, the people having the opportunity to live well and safely in their communities, that we've been able very much more closely to highlight in the police and crime plan, because we believe we can't deliver the Mayor's priorities for Greater Manchester, for a more prosperous, a safer, a greener and more equal city region, if we're not putting in place police and crime priorities that keep people safe and feeling safe. And we've also in this plan very specifically drawn out a number of equalities commitments which are threaded right through the plan, and which was a very significant part of the discussion that came back from the public and stakeholders, that they were really looking for something very explicit about the way in which the plan would drive equality, equity and inclusion. And so I think your report says that we've made 15 equalities commitments in the plan. In fact, I counted them up the other day and there are 19. So we need to adjust the draft of the plan accordingly so that the numbers add up. I should also say that we are making some further changes to the structure of the plan. We're not changing the content, the substance of the content that you have before you, but following a discussion with chief executives of your district, your chief executives and members of the Combined Authority wider leadership team, we are reworking the structure of the plan, in particular to bring out much more clearly the priorities around children and young people. That's both children and young people as victims of crime, as well as protecting children and young people from the risk of becoming drawn into harmful activity and criminality. And we are also linking that to the programmes in Greater Manchester Police around child-centred policing and across the wider criminal justice system in relation to our youth justice transformation programme. So there will be as I say, we're not looking at substantive changes, Chair, to the content, but the structure of the plan is being reworked a little bit so that we can really reflect those comments that came out from your chief executives and colleagues. The priorities very much reflect what the public have told us they see as their priorities. So you will see a significant focus on neighbourhood policing and antisocial behaviour. You'll see a significant focus on protecting victims of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence and abuse. You will see a significant focus on roads policing, safer roads and on the transport network. And you will see a considerable public appetite for a focus on tackling serious violence and organised crime. There is also attention to repeat offending, high harm offending, and really ensuring that the weight of our effort and attention is on those high harm offenders, and both taking a preventative and diversionary approach to try to reduce that high impact offending, but also our rehabilitative services and our approach, for example, to drug and alcohol strategy being focused around addressing and reducing harm too. So I think I'm really pleased with this plan, not just because I think it's tight and focused and reflects what comes out of the consultation and engagement events that we've held, but I think it will enable us to work much more effectively in the Safer and Stronger Communities Directorate to focus all of our work and our priorities in a way that, if I'm honest, we've perhaps not been able to do with the more diffuse 4-year plan that we're just coming to the conclusion of. And one of the things you will see at the end of the draft plan is that we're very keen to have a set of measures and outcomes that we are judging ourselves against, so that we can really see that the priorities set out in the new plan are being fulfilled. And again, we are very keen as much as possible to ensure that the priorities and outcomes that we are measuring align to wider GM priorities and outcomes. And that's a focus of considerable attention and work now as we prepare the combined authorities position statement and submission, if you like, to the forthcoming spring spending settlement. So we're very anxious that we sit within a bigger piece in relation to those Greater Manchester strategic priorities. And again, we have been very keen to thread through the plan the voice of lived experience, which I think, alongside our focus and commitment to community-based and partnership working, should give us a really strong connection back into the districts and the community safety partnerships that we work with, really to ensure that you experience in your communities the effectiveness of this plan and its priorities on the ground. Vicky, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. Vicky's been leading the detailed work on this.
No, I think you've covered it, Kate. I'm just going to mention that we will, after when the plan's approved, look to develop more of a comprehensive scorecard system that we can work with you on, and engagement probably with yourselves, Chair, about how you best want that to occur. Obviously, it's the key document that drives the work of what we do and what you'll hold us to account to. So we've still got a bit of work to do in that regard. And the other thing that I just want to mention was, I mean, the feedback from the events was great. It was 250 people obviously engaged with directly, nearly 1,000 via online as well. And one of the feedbacks we received was about that more constant engagement with communities. And we were going to do some kind of showcase event every year, which might supplement the annual report process as well, which we think would be a real asset to this work.
Thanks, Vicky. I'm just going to ask Jeanette to make a comment on two things.
Thanks, Chair. Just in relation, Deputy Mayor, to the commentary that you gave to the panel around the slight structure changes to the plan. Obviously, it's a statutory document for the panel to sign off, and we were expecting that this was the final version. In terms of the regulations, just to advise panel members that as long as the content doesn't change, you can approve what's here today in front of you, not necessarily approve, but scrutinise it and make any recommendations back, because obviously Deputy Mayor's at liberty to approve our own report. But just to be clear for panel members, you can, as long as there's no content changes, then you're okay to carry on with your scrutiny period today. And then, Vicky, in relation to the scorecard, I'll liaise with you around that. The panel's previously made some recommendations over the lifetime of the last plan that they'll probably want, which is usually a detailed report on each of the priorities within every calendar year. But I'll liaise with you on that.
Right, thanks for that. And seeing as we've had discussion on this before, it's been to us, etc., taking note of what Jeanette's just said, we're requested to consider the draft police and crime plan and provide the Mayor with our report or recommendations on the draft to fulfil statutory requirements. So we take that as read and then move on to item 8. Police and Crime Annual Report. This report will be presented by Deputy Mayor Kate Green and Neil Evans, GMCA, providing outlines the functions, activity and progress in meeting the police and crime objectives in the Mayor's Police and Crime Plan. Over to you, Kate.
So this is a lengthy report, I think it's fair to say, Chair, into the progress against the Police and Crime Plan 20 to 2024 over the last year. And as last year, a substantial part of the report is devoted to inviting each of the 10 districts to report on the local activities that have been delivered through our community safety partnerships. And I would like to place on record our gratitude to our community safety partners who have been really engaged with us through 6 monthly events that we've been holding with them to ensure that the priorities that they want to focus on locally are supporting and being supported by the Police and Crime Plan and the work of my directorate. I think, Chair, it shows, if I may say so, an immense amount of activity across the last year, across a very, very broad range of subjects that form the content of the present police and crime plan, and structured around the 3 priorities that were set out in the present plan around keeping people safe, reducing harm and offending, and strengthening communities and places. And it also, of course, shows the way in which we are deploying financial resources to meet the components of the plan and the sort of the way in which we're responding to the public's priorities. I think it's probably, as this is a backward-looking document, inevitably, Chair, it's probably more appropriate just to invite questions and comments from the panel. Much of this material will be familiar to you through the reports that we bring through the year to the panel on the different priorities in the plan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Steve.
Chief Janet, thank you. Steve Williams, independent member from Oldham. Deputy Mayor, this is for you. Kate, catch your mind back to when I first met you. When I first met you, I had the privilege of meeting you at the first time at your confirmation hearing, and I remember the exact words I said to you that day. I said this: Kate, I give you all the inspiration I can give you for you to do well. I don't want you to fail, and I don't want you to mess it up. I knew that you wouldn't. And that document proves that you haven't. That proves you've got stuck in and got the job done. When you read that, there's some brilliant, brilliant stuff in there. But Kate, I've got to ask you this question. There must be something in all of this that makes your job hard. If that exists, what is it?
So, first of all, thank you, Mr. Williams. I'm really proud of the work of, as I say, our community safety partners, GMP, we've seen so much improvement in GMP's performance over the last 2.5, 3 years, and it's reflected in this plan and the reports that we make about, obviously, the high-profile operations like Vulcan, like Avro, but also in just the improvement in solved crime rates, in the response times to phone calls and turning out to incidents. What we are looking at is a significantly improved police force delivering the sort of service to protect the public of Greater Manchester that they would rightly expect. And I think it's a real plan for people to be proud of in Greater Manchester. We are also, of course, a very, very challenging city region with incredibly high levels of demand on all of our public services and voluntary and community partners in relation to people's health needs, the housing pressures that we face in Greater Manchester, the deprivation still in many of our communities, the fact that we are a growing city with a growing economy, but with new communities arriving. And of course, over the last year in particular, community relations have been affected by international events as well as events closer to home, resulting in the disorder that we saw this summer. And I suppose if you were to ask me, what is it that keeps me? I have huge confidence, actually, in Greater Manchester's police's ability to respond. And I think we've seen it to those real trials that come to a force working in such a complex and demanding city region. I think you saw this summer how the force rise to those challenges. But I'm very conscious of the stretch on resources, on officers, and probably most of all, public trust and confidence. And I think, along with the newly elected government, that this is going to be the real priority for us looking forwards, that the basics are really well and truly in place now in Greater Manchester Police. The quality and the culture is now the focus of the Chief Constable's attention. But for me as Deputy Mayor, my concern is to see that translated into public trust and confidence in policing, whether you're a victim of crime, whether you are being arrested, searched, challenged by Greater Manchester Police, whether you are just anxious about safety in your own community. I want everybody in Greater Manchester to feel that trust and confidence in policing, whatever your background, your community, your age, gender. And we know that from our public and victim surveys is not yet the case. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, the hardest thing that we have to face now.
Councillor Garrido.
Thank you, Chair. over the years, there's probably been a tendency for people to be dissuaded from actually reporting a lot of crimes, maybe because we lack a workforce, police haven't been turn up, and so on. Are we convinced now that more people are actually reporting crimes, and that the reduction of 15.4% is not as a result of less crimes being reported?
It's a really good question, and I think there's certainly more recording than there was. GMP were not recording crimes 5 years ago that they should have been, and that has been massively improved. And what we are seeing is better solved outcomes. They're improving what then happens when a crime is reported. First they turn up, then they investigate it, then they reach an outcome, whether that's passing a file to the CPS or diverting people into some other disposal or whatever it is. But I am also very sure still that there is under-reporting, particularly in relation to, for example, hate crime. We are very, very sure that there is more to do to increase confidence to report hate crime and confidence that there will be a response, that you'll be taken seriously if you do. And also, although this is far from a new problem, sexual and domestic abuse and violence, where both women and men often experience multiple incidences of abuse and violence before they have the confidence to report those crimes. So I think there is more to do to give people that belief that it is worth reporting and you will be taken seriously and there will be action to follow up. Having said that, you are seeing areas where reporting is increasing, and an example I'd give, Chair, was that there's been a lot of concern over the last 12 months of insufficient seriousness being given to shoplifting. In fact, we've given a phenomenal amount of attention to shoplifting in Greater Manchester, and that has been reflected in what has been a rising number of crimes reported to GMP, because businesses now know it is worth their while, that there will be a response from GMP, that we have through our retail crime steering group a partnership approach with business to address the underlying drivers of increased shoplifting, some of which are in some cases about poverty and need, but quite a lot of what we're seeing is about organised criminality and going into shops to steal goods that can then be resold, and with attendant threats and abuse directed at shop workers, which are absolutely not going to be tolerated. So it's a really fine balance, and I have actually had exactly this conversation with the new ministers about their target to halve violence against women and girls. If by that we incentivised the police, and I don't mean specifically GMP here, to under-record and women to think it wasn't worthwhile reporting, that would be a failure. So these targets have to be designed incredibly carefully so as not to produce perverse outcomes. And that's very much a question, I think, Terry, you would vouch for this, in the DME, the Deputy Mayor's Executive, is a question I ask repeatedly. But is this actually as good as it looks? Or is it actually disguising something I ought to be worried about, which is we're not capturing the true level of crime that people are experiencing?
Just going to hand over to Terry to make comment as well.
Thanks, Chair. And I would echo everything that Kate's just said. And I think if we just used shoplifting as the example, because that's something I think most shopkeepers up and down the country feel hugely. It's something that we've let shopkeepers down in the past, is my honest view. I think the success that we need to push here is the better service we give shopkeepers when they report, the more likely they are to report again and again. And I think if we, when we look at 2021 versus 2024, 3,500 more offences detected in respect to shopkeeping. We've got a fantastic relationship now with strategic organisations like the Co-op, Morrison's, down to the local corner shop. So I think our focus is absolutely on the better quality service we give to the member of the public, the more likely they're going to report. And that's what we're really sort of from a strategic point of view, focusing on quality. The more we do that, more reports we get. Because the offenders wise, the last bit from me is, and I know this is dead plain and simple, but most people aren't offenders. Most people are decent people. And there's a very small number of offenders in Greater Manchester community who are causing a disproportionate impact, that's what we're focusing on. And that's why I do think there are still underreporting, but the better we get at our job, the less that's going to be the case.
Councillor Gold.
So I've got two very quick questions. In terms of reporting, I've asked this before, do the public know how much the improvement is? Because, you know, all councils will have residents who say, have you reported it? What's the point? I reported this 3 years ago and I never got anywhere. So we know it is, and it is, but there's probably still people out there who aren't aware with what's going on, and is enough being done? I'm not saying you should be boasting about it, but you know what I'm saying. Secondly, probably best to ask it, mentions Operation Wildflower. I know in the spring there was a paper on it. I think it was £1 million it had cost. That was last spring, and London was being paid for by the government, but GM, I think it was. GM was being paid for by GM, and I know what the deficit is. Has there been any developments on that? Any improvement? In other words, are you getting the dosh back now?
So the answer to your second question, Councillor Gold, is we're still paying for it. It is something I point out every now and again, that we are not receiving any extra funding from government, and we, West Midlands Police and the Met, are probably way out of the Met. Are on the stratosphere, admittedly, but we in West Midlands Police are probably suffering the biggest level of costs by some measure compared with other forces, and we're having to absorb those additional costs ourselves. It's raised repeatedly with ministers. We haven't yet had the police funding settlement for 25-26. We'll probably get it on Christmas Eve, although it's being worked on, let alone what the settlement will look like for 26-27 and beyond. But traditionally, you know, we find it very difficult to attract those special grants payments. There's a lot of obstacles placed in the way of forces being able to access those support for those additional costs, and you are absolutely right, it is putting a significant and continuing pressure on Greater Manchester Police, and I would have to say it's going to be business as usual, I think, for quite a long time to come because of the international context, which doesn't show any signs of abating at all. And then in relation to shouting about the improvements, this is music to my ears because we're constantly saying to Greater Manchester Police, you know, you should tell more about how well you're doing. And we've seen some good press releases going out. The other day we saw some reports were being shared publicly about more arrests in relation to historic child sexual abuse. I'm sure the public will be very pleased to see that is happening. We see regular reports in relation to, for example, the operations and exercises that GMP carry out, the AVROs, the op sector around knife crimes that we've been doing in the last few days, focuses on particular crime types. I would strongly encourage panel members and anybody watching this live stream to sign up to Be in the Loop, which is GMP's messaging service, because that is the way in which we really aim to be able to keep the public informed about this improvement in performance and the difference that GMP can make when crimes are being reported to them. But I have to agree with you. I think we need to do a lot more still, really, to ensure the public know that it is worth your while reporting a crime, it will be taken seriously, and that GMP are demonstrating improved solved crime outcomes as a result.
Thank you for that response. And I'm going to bring comments and questions to a close there. Just to state from Terry's report, other supermarkets are available. Also, Be in the Loop was what I've just written down, but you've mentioned that. Just to say that also in Rochdale, we had our neighbourhood police officers go out to our townships and to detail what they've been doing. So successful reports on AVRO going out to the township committees and getting it out that way. So report. We're going to consider that annual report and provide the Mayor with our report or recommendations on the draft to fulfil our statutory requirements. That's done. I can also say thank you for spelling Mayor Burnham's name correctly, because that was one of the embarrassments right at the beginning of what we were ever doing. I don't know if anybody remembers that. The very first page, his name was spelt incorrectly and everything had to go back to press. So, item 9, Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service Sustainability Strategy Update. This is going to be presented by Matthew Chard, who provides an overview of progress in delivering the GMCA Sustainability Strategy 2022 to 2026 and outlines activity undertaken during 23-24 that has contributed towards current progress. The report also outlines actions set to be delivered in 2024-2025. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you. So the report, as mentioned, covers the sustainability strategy of Greater Manchester Combined Authority. I think within the starting point of this paper, it's just really crucial as to pick up some of the scope of that. So it covers the core activity of Greater Manchester Combined Authority, so the activity delivered out of this building, but a lot of the activity covered within this strategy is the activity of Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, so including obviously the operation of assets and the activities delivered by the organisation. So particularly in terms of environmental impacts, a lot of the direct impacts of Greater Manchester Combined Authority take place within the Fire and Rescue Service. So this paper just gives an overview of where we are in that strategy, the stuff what's taken place during 23-24 and some of the future activity taking us further into this strategy. So without going into too much of the detail, obviously page 5 covers where we are against some of the targets within the strategy. So we've got 5 of those priority areas around carbon, protecting and restoring the environment, using our resources efficiently and responsibly, adapting to a changing climate and being sustainability leaders. Page 6 starts to go into a bit more of the detail. So in particular, the carbon emissions. So if we consider Greater Manchester Combined Authority's carbon footprint, 81% of the scope 1 and 2 carbon footprint, which is essentially the direct emissions associated with the burning of fuels and then the purchasing of electricity, that accounts for 81% of our total carbon footprint is associated with fossil fuel consumption, namely gas for heating our buildings and then petrol and diesel of fuel in our fleet. So quite high impact areas. And I think just the key point to take from here is that at the moment, the key route out of that, how do we reduce that, is electrification. So electrification of our heating systems or electrification of our fleet, albeit some parts of that are just not technically viable at the moment. Point 7 talks around the state's transformation being absolutely key to progressing how we reduce the scope 1 and 2 carbon footprint. So Littleborough Fire Station in 23-24 was first refurbishment, so gas heating system taken out of Littleborough, air source heat pump gone in, solar PV, so that building doesn't consume fossil fuels anymore. So that's a real positive step, and now obviously as we move into the Blakeleys, Whitefields of the estates programme, we'll start to see further inroads on that target. The challenging part on the carbon footprint now is that these activities are costly, they're highly resource intensive to do. They're not like in previous years where we do like individual lighting schemes and we'd see impact. Those sort of impacts and activities have kind of been and gone now. We've done that, so we're now in the high impact areas. I think really key to support in this point 10, we talk about some of the funding opportunities in the carbon reduction world in estates decarb. So we've pursued grant funding for quite a lot of surveys across the estate. So we've got £99,000 worth of survey money in the previous year. So we did that to support our future applications, potentially to further grant funding for capital works of refurbishments, for example. We've been successful at actual capital works before. And I suppose for this panel, it's probably worth referencing, we did that as a collaborative activity with Greater Manchester Police. So we did a solar project on 5 sites, so 3 police, 2 fire. So some really good stuff going on there. Fleet decarbonisation is another area, so point 11 we talk about the plans for this year. A big part of that is electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So we're bringing electric vehicles into the fleet, and to facilitate that transition moving forwards, we're progressing electric vehicle charging points across the estate. That will help us with that progression going forwards. Moving into utilities consumption, I think some quite interesting points here. We've actually seen an increase in our gas consumption since our baseline year of 18-19. One of the big issues is our control systems have just become dated and old, so we're struggling to control the systems as well as what we can do. So we're in the process of upgrading the building management system. That will give us greater control, greater scrutiny of the performance. We should be able to see a reduction in that moving forwards. Obviously, a nice mild winter as well probably would help us a little bit if in that instance. Electricity consumption, we've made good inroads on that, so we're 14% lower than 18-19 baseline. I've already mentioned about PV installations, but we've also did quite a wide-scale, fully funded LED retrofit programme. So 18 fire stations went fully LED lighting, so almost half the estate, which is a real positive step. Again, electricity is an interesting one because if we start to decarbonise buildings and fleet more, we should start to see an increase in electricity consumption. So we'll be charging vehicles up, the heat pumps will be converting air into heat through electricity. So we'll be starting to change how we monitor our consumption of utility to factor in out, is this good performance or not? Because if one's going in the right direction, it should be the positive step. We have a good array of PV systems across the estate, as raised in point 20. We've got 25 solar PV systems across the estate. Just shy of 1 megawatt of energy is generated by those systems. So if we were to equivalent that out across our total consumption, it's almost 25% of the total consumption is generated from energy. So it's a real positive high number. Some of these sites do export energy, but as we start to transition towards electric vehicles, air source heat pump, we should see less of that energy being exported. So those systems have been in place for quite a while now, so we're still getting feed-in tariff for some of those, so it's a bit of an energy reduction, but also an income stream as well. Point 23 moves into biodiversity. So biodiversity is an area where we've perhaps done a little less in over recent years, as we've been really busy on the carbon stuff, but we have fallen under the requirements of the biodiversity duty in recent months. New legislation is requiring us to look at this. So we have done stuff in the past, but we're starting to look at this in a bit more focus now. So we've got a biodiversity action plan, which we've launched, and we've split this into two areas, direct impacts and indirect action areas. The direct areas, quite a lot of that falls on what we're going to do across our estate. So we've got straight to work on this next week. We've got some tree planting across the fire estate on, I think it's about 7 or 8 stations. We've got ops crews involved in that. So it's a good news story, trying to do some good stuff within this area, but then some of the other stuff is more, how do we tackle things like, for example, with our grounds maintenance contract, can we exhaust some more opportunities from that? We've got some information in the report around waste management and travel, social value and procurement, with some really positive stuff around GMCA social value outcomes. So we're tracking social value through the portal, but also through specific contracts, and we're seeing some really high impact from that, so that's a real positive. And then just on the final page of the report, we've got some other sustainability initiatives which is worth referencing. We've held ISO 14001 in point 40, we've held that now for over 10 years. We've maintained our certification on that, which is a real positive. So we have an internal auditing process and way of managing that internally, but externally we get focus on ourselves as well. So we're scrutinising ourselves and our performance in this area and continually identifying improvements and demonstrating are we continually improving in this area. Point 41, during the His Majesty's Inspectorate for Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Services, our sustainability strategy was considered effective and outlined as a promising practice within the report, which is it's a proud moment for my team. I think it's a real positive outcome. I think it demonstrates the hard work what everybody's put in, and I think by my team, I think it extends to the whole organisation, because I'm really keen to reiterate everybody pitches in and gets involved, right through from people on a station right through to senior leadership. It's a real team effort. It's real good stuff. We've done stuff within the Women's Fire Services event as well, so we presented there. And then some other stuff in there around staff engagement. So we've ran energy saving competitions. We've set up a staff network just to try and get that wider, it's not just in a sustainability team's remit. We're trying to get people engaged and involved to support what we're trying to achieve. That's a real whistle-stop tour of the report, but happy to take questions from the panel.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions? Mr. Williams.
Mr. Williams, formal name that, Janet, rather than Steve. Thank you, Janet. Yeah. Matthew, can I just ask you this question? I've called myself to have read this report, but I must have missed this. That 1 megawatt of power, over what timescale was that generated?
So that 1 megawatt will be in one calendar year. So it's across 25 PV systems, so it's quite a large number, but obviously a portion out over 25. Obviously, we're not, as mentioned, we're not consuming that full megawatt. Some of that will be exported. So if you imagine a fire station, if they get turned out all day, they are still away from sites, that'll just be exported. But as we move towards electrified heating systems, vehicle charging, we should start to see that figure reduce down.
Any other questions or comments? Tracy, sorry. I'm looking past you there, Tracy. Sorry, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a short comment from me, if I may. I just wanted to thank Matt and his team for the work that's gone behind the reports that are provided to you today. And also to share with you that this has also been recognised through nomination and shortlisting for Team of the Year for Excellence in Fire and Emergency Awards 2024 as well. So I just wanted to place that on record. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that information. Pleased to see item 42 with the Women's Fire Service coming together in the North West and those comments there on the gender agenda, basically. Also pleased to note that Littleborough is leading the way, just because I am. So, without further questions and comments, let's move to what we are requested to do. We note the progress made against the priority areas of the GMCA Sustainability Strategy 22 to 26. We note the contents of the report, including the actions proposed for 2024-25, and we note the implications of the biodiversity duty on the organisation and the proposed response. Okay, moving on then to item 10, which is the GMP local policing update. This report is going to be presented by Matt Boyle, who's going to provide an update on neighbourhood policing in Greater Manchester. Over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Assistant Chief Constable Matt Boyle. My responsibility in Greater Manchester Police is for the local policing service delivery and also the prevention branch, and it's nice to meet you all. So the contents of the report will provide progress on our neighbourhood policing model to date, and also I'd ask the panel to note the progress and we'll bring updates as and when required. So thank you, Chair. So without repeating the content of the report itself, I'd just like to provide commentary on the various points throughout. Obviously, Greater Manchester Police sees neighbourhood policing as the bedrock of our organisation and keeping people safe. And we continue to strengthen and grow our assets and our craft around neighbourhood policing right across Greater Manchester. You'll note in the reports that we've provided an overview of our governance structure, and this has our performance management framework around how we progress neighbourhood policing, how we deliver outcomes for the public. And it's fair to say it contains strategic governance right the way down to the operational levels. And it is there for noting. And what we do is we actually follow the neighbourhood policing guidelines, which is national guidance. And we've developed our framework and around engaging communities, problem solving and prevention, and targeted activity. And these are the key component parts of neighbourhood policing that we strive to improve continually. It's fair to say that we've enhanced our performance management framework and governance structures to make them the best they can be. So they're extremely challenging for ourselves and for our neighbourhood teams and our district colleagues. And we are well supported by other assets across the force and also our partners too. And some of the key headlines that you will note around specific neighbourhood crime types is a 17% reduction year on year. Versus last year in some of the neighbourhood crime types, burglary, robbery and vehicle crime. We're over 8,000 less victims, which I think is quite notable and is significantly a change and reduction. The model itself is growing, and if I could just spend a small amount of time explaining that. So what we would know as traditional neighbourhood beat officers is at the core, led by inspectors with constables and PCSOs, and they manage the beats down to the ward level, etc., right across Greater Manchester. To complement this and to improve our effectiveness in neighbourhood policing, each district has its own prevention hub. We are continually assessing and growing them, and they are linked to the central prevention branch in Greater Manchester, and they provide the long-term problem-solving assets for each district, and also contain some specialist neighbourhood resources such as schools officers and licensing, by example. We've invested in neighbourhood crime teams who specifically deal with the investigations such as burglary, robbery, vehicle crime and theft from person. So each district has its own neighbourhood crime team connected to those core neighbourhood teams and driven through both investigation and problem solving activities. And then the introduction of neighbourhood tasking teams to complete targeted activity. Probably best described as officers who can rapidly deploy to problems in the district, such as pursuing offenders, providing extra resource to complete warrant activities and develop patrol activities as well to support real key issues in the neighbourhood. That structure is probably not seen in many police forces across the country, and in fact I'd go as far to say it's probably a significant investment in neighbourhood policing. I'm certainly very proud of that structure. It's growing, it's developing, and we continue to strengthen it, and I think the results that I've previously mentioned pay dividend to that. You'll note in the report there are various items relating to our staff makeup, and I'm sure it is often commented around any vacancies. The report does note 11.5%. It's actually a bit less than that. It's just under 10% at the moment. We would suggest that that is an operating vacancy factor. We do strive to have 100% of our establishment. With the ebb and flow of resources within any police force, it's an expected BAU business as usual vacancy factor. I've highlighted abstraction levels. We introduced the neighbourhood abstraction app to monitor the amount of times that officers would be removed from their neighbourhood. We've developed that now to a much more user-friendly system. So any abstractions that we do encounter, we accurately record so we can heat map where our officers are. It is rare that officers are abstracted, but when we have such large force events, there is a necessity to pull on the strength of the police force and move officers and staff away, but it is very rare, and we monitor that. And again, the performance management framework that I mentioned keeps a close eye on that. So item 4 just starts to break down, provide details under those key headlines that I mentioned around the performance management framework. It's fair to say engagement is probably one of the key parts of neighbourhood policing, and something that we are continually wanting to expand, certainly with all members of the community, create two-way conversations so we can help identify where we're needed the most and develop our responses appropriately. We're just in the process of developing a local neighbourhood newsletter. I do have a draft copy on my laptop that I'd quite happily show colleagues after the meeting. You will see that coming out to all elected members and councils in the next couple of weeks. And the reason why we're doing that is to provide the operating context of each neighbourhood team and those wealth of component parts, neighbourhood crime, prevention, targeted, and the MBOs as well, to add complete context on what we are doing in your neighbourhoods to make them safer, as we mentioned before. We mentioned Be in the Loop, another plea from myself, if we could champion signing up, Be in the Loop. It's growing at about 2,000 sign-ups a month at the moment. Our ambition is to get to well over 100,000 and keep growing it. There's more functionality available, the more people that we can sign up in our communities and the more informed that we can be with that. So a small plea from me. Also on Be in the Loop, we've activated the engagement tracker. So as our officers in neighbourhoods are completing engagement activities, we're actually recording them as well to see how much, how far, and the effect of our engagement that we're achieving. Targeted activities, we are now introducing serious and organised crime management responsibility in our neighbourhoods, and that's growing. There is an example in the report that relates to Operation Uno, which was a Stockport-based operation against organised crime led by the neighbourhood teams themselves, and there's some fantastic results there that you will see, notably civil orders, vulnerable residents rehoused, long-term investigations around drug supply, and that for me demonstrates the power of what neighbourhood policing can actually do in our communities to make people safer and pursue offenders. And obviously problem solving and prevention. We are internationally known as excellent problem solvers with Operation Vulcan, and we are spreading that through all of our neighbourhood teams. That methodology, utilising clear, hold, build and solid problem solving approaches is something that we are getting better at, and they are tracked and they're in the performance framework as well. Operation Libra is mentioned, which targets antisocial behaviour, and we've seen some excellent results there with 39 people arrested, high number of stop searches and ASB powers used, for example. And if you don't mind, I'd just like to highlight Operation Hurricane. This is our approach to off-road bikes and e-bikes that do cause unrest in our communities. They're very visible, they're dangerous, and we're tackling that. We launched Operation Hurricane. We seized over 100 bikes in the first 100 days. And reports around this type of activity have dropped 21% since its introduction and over the past year. With the 5 top areas identified in districts reducing by 28%. So again, making our communities safer. And that tactic now is being shared with other police forces as well as best practice, and we'll get that, get our success shared. However, we won't be complacent with that. There's a good example in the report, Chair, around the airport as well. So they do have their own neighbourhood team dealing with rogue meet and greet companies. And again, incidents around that have reduced by 73%. Again, problem solving, understanding the issue, working with partners to make the area safer. And if I just move on towards the end of the report, we've done a refresh on our independent advisory groups and the independent community scrutiny panels. We've increased the applications for new members, and we've introduced training as well to all the members, which has been very well received too. And just last, right care, right person does have an impact on neighbourhood policing and local policing. Putting people straight to the right care provider, the very first point, means that some of our demand has reduced, and we're using that to good effect to protect neighbourhood resources and complete more targeted activity locally. So I'll take questions. I know I've flew over that, just mindful of the time, Chair.
Thank you very much for that report. Very brief questions, because we've got one more report that needs giving time. So, Mr Williams, Councillor Bridges, Councillor Garrido.
Cheers, Janet. Thank you. Just a comment, Janet. Matt, when me, Janet and David had the privilege of interviewing the Chief Constable for his position in his confirmation hearing, the first thing he said was neighbourhood policing, got to be neighbourhood policing. And he's always advocated that. He's always stuck to it. He's maintained it. And I remember saying to him at that meeting, Mr Watson, you're a million miles away from that, so you've got no chance of doing it yet. And Greater Manchester Police was way over there in the distance. But Matt, today, you can hold your heads up high now, you guys, with what you've done with this. A colossal amount of work is taking place to get to this point. So that's brilliant, that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There's loads of good in the report, and there's some really good work that we've seen, particularly in Manchester and Vulcan and all those kind of things. I suppose in Manchester, I would say, obviously, we're slightly behind the curve with neighbourhood policing. I know you've met with us yourself and others across the table have as well, and Dave has been really engaged with us. So from our perspective, we're really keen to get on and crack that nut in Manchester so we can kind of get some of the benefits that I know we've already kind of rolled out in other places. So it'd be remiss not to say that at this stage, I think, because we can see the benefits of it. I know you can already see it in other places, and we sort of want to catch up and get there, which I know we're talking about in terms of timescale.
Thank you. Councillor Garrido.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I don't want to appear critical, so I'm going to start off by saying that I really do applaud the work that you're doing and trying to do in certain neighbourhoods. We have seen a number of schemes over the years, and unfortunately they tend to fade away over a period of time. So I'm just looking for some assurance that these new schemes are not going to fade away, and that they're going to carry on, they're going to build up. Because I think that's where it's at. That's where we really need to make a big difference. The one thing that does concern me is that we're down to one PCSO per community neighbourhood. And I see it's my own area, down to one PCSO. They do a tremendous work in terms of being in touch with the community. They attend the local coffee mornings. They go to the elderly person's lunches. They're seen around because, admittedly, the police officers can't always be there. And I just feel it's a pity that we have seemed to have reduced them to a relatively small number. And I don't know whether this is something which is under consideration for the future, but I'd certainly like to see some improvement, in those figures.
Right. Before you come in, can I take Councillor Chadwick and then you can answer everything? Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I just make a compliment to the GMP? Because as Chair of Licensing in Bolton, we have seen a succession of off-licences where counterfeit goods, illicit tobacco, illicit vapes have been taken out of circulation, and there's been a partnership working with the licensing team and then our environmental services team. This has got to be good. This is the way forward, and can I compliment them because they have done a marvellous job over the last 12 months. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Councillor, thank you for your comments. We continue to develop neighbourhood policing and will be the country's leader setting the standard. And the Chief Constable is certainly right behind that, and so am I and the rest of our team. Councillor Bridges, you are right to point out that the City of Manchester is currently under development. We have set timescales that we have met to discuss, and I know that Chief Superintendent Meany is keeping you updated regularly. Likewise, I meet with him as well, so we will be returning with the plan shortly, and that can be noted for your information as well. Councillor, I share your concern, the value of a good PCSO, the eyes and ears of the community, as they've always been known, cannot be underestimated. Our model is one per ward. We do believe that set against the demands that are placed amongst neighbourhoods and our districts, that is the right figure. I'd always like to have more. I do welcome you with that, but the increase in police officers as well for that workforce blend and warranted powers is something that we are focusing on also. I can't promise you more PCSOs unless we've got more funding, Deputy Mayor, but it's something that we can always keep under review, and we are grateful for the feedback and the conversation and dialogue that accompanies that. But you are right to highlight that a good PCSO is worth the weight in gold. Absolutely, absolutely. And Councillor Chadwick, thank you for your comments too. This is about tackling recurrent demand, getting upstream, targeting those who are causing harm to our communities, and using our powers for the longer term to actually reduce that and make it safer. So thank you.
We have some very good officers.
We do. We do. Thank you very much.
So thank you for that, Matt. Good report and obviously good performance we've had discussions about PCSOs ad infinitum in this panel. So just to say, we are aware of where it's gone from and where it's going to. But basically, the first paragraph, I think it is, where it says that the bedrock of British policing is neighbourhood policing, is where we're coming from and going to today, as it were. I'd just like to make a comment on the missing from home reduction, which is amazing. That's fantastic. Thank you. So we note the progress today, and we will receive regular progress updates as and when required to listen to more successes, hopefully. Thanks, Matt. Moving on to item 11 and the Vision Zero update, which is going to be presented by Dave Russell and Peter Bolton, who are going to share the final Vision Zero strategy and action plan for Greater Manchester, and it'll provide an overview of the Greater Manchester-wide road safety initiatives which form part of the action plan. Over to you, Dave.
I'll take the report, that's okay, Chair. Thank you. I'm Peter Bolton. I'm Network Director Highways for Transport for Greater Manchester, and part of my team is the Safer Roads Greater Manchester team. So the report shares the Vision Zero action plan and strategy that we're seeking endorsement for, which aims to eliminate deaths and life-changing injuries on our roads by 2040. Why is this important? Last year, 799 people were killed or seriously injured on our roads. 45 of those were fatalities. And I think I always say at this point, it's really important you remember they're not numbers, they're people, and there's somebody, a loved one, behind those numbers. We do have an encouraging trend. Compared to 2023, fatalities are down 30%, and killed and seriously injured are down 6%, but it's still an intolerably high number, and it would not be accepted on any other mode of transport. In 2021, the Mayor's Manifesto proposed a Road Danger Reduction Action Plan, which we developed. One of the actions in that action plan was to look at Vision Zero, and when Dame Sarah Story, the Active Travel Commissioner, came in, she proposed in Active Travel Mission for Greater Manchester to adopt Vision Zero. Since January this year, when draft Vision Zero was approved by the combined authority, we have strengthened our governance and our approach to Vision Zero to help us drive forward Vision Zero, both in terms of getting the strategy and action plan to where they are now, but looking forward into the future and driving through the actions. We set up a strategic steering group, which is chaired by Chief Fire Officer Dave Russell, and also as Councillor Anderton from this panel on the steering group. Also, Deputy Chief Constable Terry Wood represents GMP. We also have representatives from Salford Royal Trauma Unit, NWAS, and road safety specialists and colleagues from National Highways. And CA are supported by the Active Travel Commissioner, Dame Sarah Story. I think it's really important that it is a cross-sector group because we will not deliver the change we need if it's seen as something that's delivered by transport or by local authorities. It really has to be owned by everybody. That includes businesses and the public if we're going to make the necessary societal changes. Since the strategy was approved by the CA in January, we have held two sections of engagement with the public and stakeholders. The first was on the draft strategy approved by the CA, and part of that engagement was to ask the public what were the things that they would feel would make them feel safer on our roads. We took that information to create our first draft of the strategy, which we engaged with the public back in May, June this year. The strategy, as presented, sets out the case for Vision Zero and why it is important. It also contains some real-life stories that demonstrate the devastating impact that road harm can have on people's lives. And the action plan sets out the actions that our partners have said they will bring forward to make our roads safer. The plan is the action plan and strategy will be taken to the combined authority on the 29th of November for formal approval and adoption. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that. Any comments or questions on this report? Steve?
Cheers, Janet. Thank you. Dave, Peter, I read this again this morning, and the statistical data is alarming as anything, isn't it, when you look at it? But, however, everybody, just imagine if you could say to all those drivers that behave so recklessly, not caring, not bothering, don't give a damn, the bobbies over there have to go and try and call them to make them think differently. And it's tremendously hard to do that. And all the emergency services, all three of them, have to attend incidents where something's happened, where there's been something that's happened to somebody. And you're thinking, just imagine if you could touch the hearts and minds of those individuals to not behave like that. How much different would it be? Those statistical data that you showed, how much different would that be? But let me just share this with you. Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service has 2 technical response units. These guys are the SOS for Greater Manchester, as Dave will advocate. One's at Ashton, one's at Lee, and it operates within the call sign Golf 39 Romeo 1, and it mobilises with those specialist appliances. In a month's period, how many times would you think that appliances gets mobilised? Every day. Isn't it, Dave? Every day, those 2 appliances, along with the other supporting vehicles from local fire stations, are mobilised to perform a rescue on people that have been involved in a road traffic collision. So, Peter, what you're trying to advocate in this is really, really good. But somehow we've got to touch the hearts and minds of so many people to think differently. Thank you.
Having attended the safe driving event in Middleton last week, I think everything you've just said was mirrored in those events. The case is budget and then delivery, because those young people took on board those messages. I think the only thing I would have said if I had to feedback was that there was no opportunity for question and answer, which would have allowed those young people to understand fully by asking those questions, speaking to professionals and owning that moment. Because if they can't own the moment, they're never going to take it on. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
Yeah, can you clarify 20 mile an hour zones? Because we're seeing a lot more of them. Are they enforceable?
Okay, so having had those questions and comments, I'm going to ask Kate to come in on what you were saying, Tony, and some of what you were saying, Steve, and then I'll come back for the answer on the 20 mile an hour. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And this is to the point about hearts and minds, and particularly young drivers, because we do see different patterns of vulnerability to deaths and serious injuries, both according to age and to the kind of road user you are too. So a pedestrian or a motorbike user more vulnerable, for example. But actually older people are also vulnerable. So we've got to be really quite subtle in our approach. And I think I'd also say the important thing about Vision Zero, Peter, is that it's a whole system response, isn't it? It's not just about education and hearts and minds. That's a piece of it. But the way in which we design the infrastructure, the roads infrastructure, the way in which we change our usage of cars and make more use of the public transport network and alternatives to driving is important too. We are evaluating Safe Drive Stay Alive. It's a programme that is very, very impactful, as you will know from having been there on the day. But we need to think about how we sustain that impact. And also we're not reaching by any means all of the young people in Greater Manchester are approaching the age at which they may be thinking of learning to drive. So a comprehensive evaluation process began last year, and we're doing a bit more this year, because we need to be sure that we've got the very best model for really making the maximum impact on people's awareness and changing their behaviour. And the other thing I'd just point to is the very, very effective virtual reality headsets that we're using, for example, in Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, which I managed to have a go on last year. For some reason, they wanted me to try the older drivers version. I cannot understand what that was about, but there's a very, very powerful one for young drivers. So I think looking at all the different ways we can reach the audiences we want to is a really important part of changing people's habits and changing their awareness. And we should put on record, Chair, shouldn't we, our immense gratitude to the families, the bereaved families who came to Safe Drive Stay Alive last week and shared their experiences, because I think that probably had the biggest impact of all, along with the contributions of the emergency service representatives on the young people.
Yes, and if there are any members of the panel that haven't been to Safe Drive Stay Alive this year, can I suggest that you do go next year? Because, well, I'm saying go next year, that's presuming that it would be running next year. It is very impactful. Peter, can you come in on the 20 mile an hour question from Councillor
I might
Ball?
defer to my colleagues in the police, if that's okay.
Terry, can you come in on the 20 mile an hour?
I was expecting that. As long as a 20 mile an hour zone's implemented in according to regs, the law, etc., and it's implemented the right way, it is enforceable. I think some around the country, from my past experience, there's been some question marks on some of the zones, etc. So there is a little bit of a mystique, I think, around are they enforceable or not. As long as they meet the regs, the law, the requirements, they are enforceable. So yes, they are, if it's done properly. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, it's a common tale, I suppose, in hearing it. But you remember in the early days me saying that we needed to double the road policing department, etc., etc. That's all been done. That's in place. And if you go on social media most days, you'll see that the road policing unit are enforcing speeding outside schools most days. Some of those, I'm sure, would be in 20 mile an hour zones. I can't say for a fact that is because I lose track of which schools they're at, but it's why we've doubled the road policing department. Clearly, there's the speed vans, etc. as well. So, yeah, in practice, we can do it. I think there's a dose of common sense required as well, as it is in every aspect of policing, around when and how and who does it. But absolutely, you know, for example, you put a 20 mile an hour speed limit outside a school, a primary school. It's in our interest, isn't it, from a society and a public safety point of view, that there'll be some form of enforcement done in and around. Can't be there every day, but it's why we doubled our department, because people are dying on the roads. And again, we work very closely in the partnership in respect to that. And I would plug the Community Speed Watch here as well, because there's different tactics we can use, and we've been growing the Community Speed Watch as a really, really valid tactic. And whilst they can't prosecute, we see it as really effective on driver behaviour when you're caught by your own community.
Thank you, Terry. Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've recently taken the Chair's role in respect of the Vision Zero strategic steering group. But what I just wanted to do was say thanks really to Peter and his team, because there's been an inordinate amount of work that's gone into the production of the strategy and the action plan. And I think in particular how hard they've lent into public consultation. So really appreciative of that. But I think the other point that I wanted to make, and it appertains to colleagues in the room, I think the importance around governance, because writing a strategy and an action plan is an easy thing to do. There's some serious hard yards that need to be covered to deliver this Vision Zero strategy, and it requires a systems-led approach from everybody across Greater Manchester. And I think what we've got that maybe hasn't existed as clearly and with as much rigour as it does do now is the governance framework to deliver the action plan, and importantly to make sure that we're accountable for that as officers, either into the B Network Committee or whether you choose to take update reports into this particular panel. And I think what the Strategic Steering Oversight Group can do in a way better than before is to knit this together. So I'm listening to Matt before around Operation Hurricane and the work that GMP are doing around mopeds and scooters and different things. And I think what we've got now is a governance structure that can knit this together and importantly can track and monitor and be accountable for performance as we move through the each of the 3 years of the action plan. But I think what it needs both from an officer level and politically is we've got to hold people's feet to the fire on on these issues, and whether it's blue lights, whether it's the local authorities, there's a role for everybody to play in delivering that. And I think without that collegiate approach, there is a danger that we don't deliver, or pockets of good activity exists in isolation where really it needs to be driven together. But I'll end with where I started. There's some fantastic people that live and breathe this every day and have done a phenomenal job, I think, in terms of the strategy and the action plan, and thanks to Peter and his team.
Thanks for that, Dave, and thanks, Peter, for the report. I wrote down enforcement part way through everybody talking, and basically it's about changing mindsets. And I mean, Kate said that she was given the headset for older drivers. I just wonder whether nationally there should be some kind of move towards retesting people, because it's not always young drivers that are at fault in this. We do concentrate through things like Safe Drive, Stay Alive with young drivers. Sorry, I'm making a comment here as the chair, but basically, as an older driver, I would appreciate being retested, you know, and coping with the age of my parents and one of them still wanting to drive at 90. It is something that I think that we need as nationally to start to look at. It'd be great if we get zero by 2040. I hope I'm here to see it. But basically, I think that the enforcement thing is it's pointless putting any limits anywhere if you can't enforce it. So, as I said, changing mindsets is really, really important. So, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Peter, for that report. We note the content of that report and endorse that final Vision Zero strategy and action plan and the formal adoption of a Vision Zero ambition for Greater Manchester, where no one will suffer death or life-changing injuries on our roads. Moving on to, for information only, you've got the Deputy Mayor's decisions. You've got the joint forward plan. Just to remind members of the panel that the next meeting of the panel will take place on Monday the 27th of January 2025. That meeting will be the precept meeting. Quoracy is of the most importance. It's imperative that we are quorate. So if for any reason any member cannot be here, then please make sure that your substitute is informed well in advance and make sure that they're coming to that meeting. Also, I'd like to wish everybody for Wednesday good transgender flag raisings, for those of you that are doing the transgender flag. And just to say, if there's any other information that you need on the Deputy Mayor's decisions and joint forward plan, can you put those queries through to Lisa Lees? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our meeting. Thank you very much for your time, and safe journeys home. Thanks, Councillor.